In this video, we're going to have an interview with Joshua Bingham. Joshua is a third-generation New Mexican, and he is a master jeweler. Joshua has lived for some time on some family property that is located where the old San Marcos Pueblo was. San Marcos Pueblo was probably active from, as early as 600 AD, and it was active through 1680, 1690 or so. And it's believed that those who left San Marcos ended up either at Cochiti or Santo Domingo, which is known as Kiwa. Joshua still finds some artifacts and remnants of the old prehistoric miners who mined at the Cerrillos area. And that story is all in Turquoise in America, Part 1, Great American Turquoise Rush, 1890 to 1910. So Joshua is known for his use of fine turquoise, and we're going to get to see some of that today. So let's go talk to Joshua. Well, Joshua, welcome to turquoiseinamerica.com. It's wonderful to have you here. I've been enjoying your beautiful jewelry. So I thought maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about how you got involved in turquoise and jewelry making.
So jewelry making kind of just came on a whim, I guess. Was working with my brother, and we were kind of just fiddling around, and we decided to make a couple rings. And we made them out of old railroad date nails, and we polished these up. And I looked at that and I was like, man, that's pretty cool. So I decided to dig a little deeper and decided, well, maybe I'll give my hand at some jewelry. So at that point, I didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I really didn't have any mentorship or anybody to reach out to. So I did my own research and gathered up some materials and some tools, and I didn't really know a lot about turquoise, so I educated myself in that regard by just reading books or what was available online, and just kind of trained my eyes to go after certain pieces, really look at jewelry in a whole, the craftsmanship, the stone, where the turquoise was from, and really study that. And that's kind of what I based my work off of. And my work, I really enjoyed the handmade approach, true handmade, where I start my jewelry off with, fine silver, casting grain. I will pour an ingot, and then I'll roll it out, roll my sheet, roll my wire, roll everything out that I'm going to use. If I'm using gold bezels, I will take, solid gold, and I will create 18K, 22K, and create my own bezels or whatever I may need. So I enjoy being able to make everything in my jewelry.
So those are gold coins.
Yes.
And you're trying to look at what level of purity on the gold then?
So it depends. So I don't work with 14K. I normally work with 18 or 22. I don't work with 24 because it's too soft. So depending on what material I'm working with, the rarity of it, will determine kind of the carat of gold that I'll be using.
What coins are those?
These are Canadian maple leaves, 24
And the
carat.
maple leaves are pure gold then?
Yes. Yeah.
So that is there are not 24, but
this is 24.
It is 24.
It is 24 karat, yes.
So then you will put some alloy in that to bring that down to 18 or
I'll dumb it down
20.
a little bit. Yep, there's a calculation, and then there's some alloy you add. Same with the fine silver.
Now, will you also, I noticed there is, because I think this is all called the fabrication.
Yes.
You're fabricating this hand fabrication,
yes,
which really goes back to the old native style of making jewelry as opposed to casting,
right?
Basically. So with that, I noticed some jewelers will use silver coins as well, rather than the findings where they can, but they're doing the same things. You're melting it down into an ingot and then rolling.
Yes.
Okay.
So coin silver is 90% silver. I like to use 999 fine, because then I can critique it to the way that I want it. I like to go a little bit higher than 925 sterling. I like to shoot for like a 950. and it just gives it holds its beauty better. It doesn't tarnish as fast. You really get that really nice pop. You know, I like to use a lot of mixed metals. You know, 22 karat gold and 950 silver.
Now that gets complicated, as I understand it, because the temperature and all the issues about working with sterling when you're creating the bezel, when you're doing all this stuff and attaching it together, different temperatures. So
Yes.
working with both gold and silver at the same time is kind of unique, isn't it?
It's unique in its own regard, and it's, you know, and also when you say the temperature things, like, you know, there's easy solder, there's medium solder, there's hard solder. So there's these different temperature areas for when you're creating a piece, different steps. So I always like to start with hard and kind of work with medium most of the way, and then if there's anything at the very end, I will use easy because it's a lower temperature flowing solder.
Now, don't you also have to sort of temper the steel? I think you heat it up, you pound it, then you heat it again. There's a whole process that goes with that, isn't there?
So at the very end, you can heat it up to like an ashy gray, and that will then temper the metal. I like to do what's called like a half temper, and that gives the opportunity to, if the client needs to make a simple adjustment, they can, because when you full temper something, you don't really have that capability. You risk cracking it. You don't want to crack the metal. So you can temper something just with heat without banging on it to temper it. So there's different ways in tempering the metal. But I really enjoy the approach of just making everything myself. So I'm not dependent on a supply house to...
So that would mean you'd go to Rio Grande and buy the wire, buy whatever the stuff to kind of cut corners.
Right. To make it go a little bit quicker. But I enjoy the process of creating everything that I'm going to use, from cutting the turquoise from its rough state into a cabochon. And then sometimes I'll hold on to a cabochon for years because it's just not ready to. And then I'll create something. All my creations are done not on paper. They are done as it comes together. Nothing is drawn out. I don't draw anything. So everything is created from my eye to what it is on metal. And there is only one of that creation. So I focus a lot on one of a kinds. My Beyond the Fence line that I created a couple, 7-8 years ago. That's just true to my New Mexico roots, born and raised in New Mexico. I really enjoy the old barbed wire fences around the old adobe buildings, and I really like that approach and the contrast of it. So the Beyond the Fence cuffs are really cool and really true to the West, the true West. So I really enjoy
one of the things that has impressed me, I think you've only been doing this about 10 years.
Yes.
And in that time, you've gone from a novice to what I would consider a master jeweler. Mm-hmm. And you're now, I think, one of the top jewelers in the trade. Of course, it's always a little different because you're doing a Southwest style.
Right.
I think it's influenced by native designs, but you've really found your own way,
right.
Which, of course, as an Anglo, you have to.
Yes.
Because you will never, ever be an Indian. Yeah. So you just are, although probably if your family's been here long enough, there might be a little Indian in there somewhere along the way. But we don't claim that, of course. But you're honoring the tradition. And one of the things I appreciate about your work is you honor the turquoise tradition so much.
Yes.
And the turquoise you use is just the highest grade.
Yeah.
How do you source this? How do you find this?
It takes a lot of patience and a lot of research and digging and just kind of, connecting with people in the industry. And, I like to keep pretty private when it comes to, because I don't want my honey hole to be somebody else's. So, just really being involved in the community, and you'll hear somebody say, oh, well, my grandpa, used to make jewelry and he collected turquoise and I have a bunch of it and I probably sell it. You want to look at it? Absolutely. I would love to give you a little bit of education and maybe even buy it from you. I don't know. So it goes on a whim. And, I've ran into people at gas stations that you know, I have this turquoise and it's been in the garage for 25 years.
Well, you have to,
You know,
you want to be ready for the opportunity,
yes.
but you also have to have the means. And I think a lot of times the timing when the jeweler has the money, it's just like here at Indian Market. I've been selling books, and I always know that's when I sell to the native jewelers, because at Indian Market they're still going to have some money.
Yeah.
Right before Indian Market, they probably don't have any money at all, because they've spent everything preparing their inventory.
Yeah.
So I know trying to take advantage of those has to be a challenge.
It does. You really have to have a little bit of a cushion to be able to purchase top grade stones, because turquoise is really, from when I started to where it is now, it has really gone way up in value. And I like to educate, clients, when they're purchasing something, this stone is in gold for a reason. This ring is solid gold for a reason. So give them a little educational background as to where the turquoise is from. Why is it so expensive? Because there's so many different variations of turquoise, as you know, that we could go from, chalky block to a gem grade 1 of 1. And you're really going to see this huge spectrum of price range. And so educating people is very important, because they're going to say, well, why is this stone $2 and this one is $4,000? Well, let me give you a little bit of education in that regard. So I think education is very important in the whole turquoise world, and creating jewelry and explaining to them that my jewelry is 100% handmade by me, in-house. I create everything from basically nothing, and then create something, and nothing's ever drawn on paper. I know I'm horrible at drawing, so I don't draw anything. So I like to envision, if I can envision the finished product, which I always do, I can execute. And that's something I really enjoy doing.
Well, I wanted to invite you here to turquoiseinamerica.com, because we're all education here, and I really appreciated your work. For anybody who would be interested in having a Joshua Bingham original, how would they contact you?
Joshua Bingham Jewelry.com, and we're also on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We have our website, and then you can contact us that way. My main focus is custom work. So you see a stone you like, let's create something.
Okay.
And yeah.
So let's take a look now at part of your process. We'll get a little closer look at some of the turquoise, and take a closer look at some of that jewelry you have there.
Sure.
So Joshua, maybe you could point out some of the steps that you take when you're creating these wonderful designs.
So we'll go from, like this is Caraco Lake, chartreuse green, very hard to come by. This the bicolored, chartreuse, really beautiful, rare. So it'll go from this rough state here to a finished cabochon, and then we'll transition into basically how my process works is I will create something without the stone, and then the stone will then be incorporated to the design itself, because
so the design comes
first.
The design comes first. You have all these stones, and then you're going to match a stone that you
I'll see what goes best.
You have done what fits best.
Right, because there's been times where I create something off of a stone, and then that stone just doesn't work with that design when it's finished, and then I go, oh, well, I've got this one. I've had this one for a couple of years. That's the one that needs to go on there. So that's kind of how
about those two pieces with those two big, nice pieces of turquoise? What turquoise is that?
This is number 8.
Number 8, beautiful. Both of those?
Yes, both of them.
Now, interesting, you have kind of two different looks there. Number 8, as our viewers know, really came, it's a pocket mine, so the turquoise was formed in the clay pockets, and it really came out of a black clay and a red clay. And that kind of formed the different matrix, and we're seeing both of those examples there.
Right. And this one right here is an ingot cuff. This is all, filed saw work. created hand textures. All my textures are done by hand. So whatever texture I'm trying to achieve, it'll be done by hand. And
so when possible, you will buy the turquoise rough, cut it yourself.
yes.
And of course, that, as we were talking earlier, that's getting harder and harder to do as the miners have a harder time finding the high-grade rough. And then if they do find it, they want to cut it themselves.
Occasionally, I will find a cabochon that I like, and I may have to adjust a little bit in the cutting because sometimes there's so many different variations of way people cut stuff. I like mine cut a certain way just for my setting style. So I will correct that in the cutting process. So I may find a stone that's already cut and I'm like, I can work with that. So I will buy it as a cut stone. But I would say most of the time I'm all cutting my own cabochons.
Now I see there's the one cuff there that has a lighter look. Is that just is that the finished look? Or
so it's in the process of being completed. So, you know, the intricate designs and tying everything together with, 22 karat gold, I think really brings out, texturing certain areas really brings out a different look when it comes to, Southwestern jewelry, when you're trying to achieve something. I really like the stars and stuff. And I think a lot of this is celestial in a way. But I really like the way everything comes together, and your math better be pretty good because if you mess up, it ruins the whole thing. So this is in the process of being completed. And
how will you get, if you want to get the same texture that you have, that darker texture that you have on those others?
Like this?
Yeah, how does that?
So that's just done with a patina solution. It's a solution of muriatic acid, and there's another chemical involved. A lot of jewelers will use liver of sulfur. I don't particularly use that because it smells real bad, and it doesn't tend to adhere to the sterling very well. It kind of gets flaky. Yeah. So I use this stuff right here. And you can kind of control the depthness of darkness that you want.
So it's very, very involved. That's the alchemical side of the...
Right, and then you're going to,
the art.
Polish it off or brush it off with a piece of, steel wool or whatever you may use to kind of highlight the texture areas.
Now, I've noticed on both of these gold bezels on these cuffs, there's sort of what I'd call like a solid bezel. I've also seen some of your work, on your rings especially, where you'll have a bezel that will be, filed or?
Castellated. So
castellated,
yes.
That's it.
So castellated bezels really, in order to use one, I really think it has to go with the design. So if the design is real busy, I try to stay away from a castellated bezel because you really don't want to take away from, the busyness and then have it all over the place. You want to be able to have a focal point on the stone and then have the busy work.
So that would lend itself more towards rings because you have less room to get busy.
Right. So it really just depends on the design in general. If I'm going to do a castellated bezel or do a plain bezel, it just depends. It really does, on the design itself. It really has to flow with everything, and sometimes a castellated bezel does not work. Well,
Joshua, I love your work so much, and you're still a young man. You got a great future. 10 years, who knows what will happen over the next decade. And I encourage any of our viewers, if you have some turquoise, if somebody has a stone, is it something you could
possibly? Yes,
possibly.
Sure, yeah.
But they can contact you, reach out to you, and see if there's a Joshua Bingham original in your future. So thanks very much, Joshua. Appreciate it.
You bet. Yep.